Thank you for the click. My name is Luxeley, and I am the overgrown man-child wearing Star Trek pajamas. Couple of things here, few warnings. If you are really passionate about the World of Warcraft lore, this might not be a video for you, because I do have a writing background. I've had several short stories published, and quite honestly, I want to get into the writing here because it's very good in places, it's also really bad in places, and also, obviously, spoiler warning right here, right now. So we enter into Lordaeron, which looks like a true war zone here. This is really well done by Blizzard. You're approaching Lordaeron, you're riding through just dirt and dust everywhere and smoke and burnt out trees, and it's really well done on a visual aspect here. And here I am following one of these new characters, Stormwind dudes. So we're going to get over to the battlefield, and this is a scenario essentially that you're going to do with anywhere from I've done them with 3 other people, I've done them with 8 other people, so they tend to scale on based on the size. As you can see, there's only 2 other people in my group right now. And here I am listening to Gen Greymane, one of my favorite all-time Alliance characters. Who's one of your favorite characters on the Alliance side or even on the Horde side? Let me know in the comments. I do respond to the comments, provided people keep things very simple so I don't have to really struggle with the English language. And, of course, you could write it in a different language, which would really be a major struggle for me. But I always respect people who speak 2 languages because they speak 1 more than I do, or maybe 1.5 more than I do. But we do this little 4 alliance thing, get all buzzed up, and now we're going to go fight one of these big goblin things, smoke everywhere. And again, it tells us, look, there's smoke. Yes, I know there's smoke. I can see again. Thanks for the play-by-play. Thanks for the update. There's definitely an upgrade to the overall game engine here, where they're implementing this smoke and implementing fog. You see it throughout the zones that you're questing in. You see it in this scenario, both on the Horde side and on the Alliance side. And it really does make things very immersive. And immersion is something sometimes some players are just not very aware of, but it's something that Blizzard has always done well and continues to do well and continues to improve on. And I think that is one of the biggest draws of the game, is that sense of immersion that you do have, that you do get, whether it's the environment or it's a particular class you're playing or the spells, a dungeon, a raid. All these things, got to give Blizzard an A for it, and it definitely seems to be something that's even improved. It was noticeably improved from MoP to Warlords of Draenor the Fun, noticeably improved from Warlords of Draenor the Fun to Legion, and now Legion to BFA. These scenarios also offer a great opportunity for players to get to know the NPCs. Anduin, Sylvanas, Gen, Brightcaller, what's Nathanos. You ever? I'm going to digress. I have to say this. Do you ever notice how it's not the case that the Alliance always agree with each other. It's not the case that the Horde always agree with each other. Whatever particular race you're talking about, that leader, he always has maybe a little bit of dissension. But when it comes to the undead, whatever Sylvanas says, they will do. It is just absolutely amazing. Did anybody ever else notice that? Like, she would just go say, okay, here's the deal. Go kill yourself. And they would do it. They just listen to whatever she says. It doesn't matter if it's immoral, it doesn't matter if it's indecent, it doesn't matter if it's ridiculous. They'll do it, and they listen. You don't necessarily see this with other races. And the question is, why do you think that is? Why do you think that the undead have this undying loyalty for someone like Sylvanas? Leave it in the comments. Very curious to know. But overall, you really get an opportunity when you do these scenarios to learn about these NPCs, what they're passionate about, what gets under their skin, how they fight, what kind of spells they bring to the game, how they negotiate, all these things that develop character. These are great opportunities to do it, and Blizzard takes advantage of it on both sides of the coin, Horde and Alliance, on this scenario. And it's interesting because you're seeing it from 2 different perspectives, and you might say the Horde are on the wrong side of the coin here. They might be leaning towards the evil side of the coin, but I don't know. I think that there's some other cards that need to be turned over, things that need to be revealed, and we might find out that the Horde are not quite as evil as people think. And this is more of a George R.R. Martin kind of world in the sense that nobody's 100% good, nobody's 100% evil. We're all human, we all make mistakes, we all have frailties. But as you can see, the Horde have introduced this huge Azerite tank that's indestructible that Anduin destroys. So it's not quite so indestructible. And this is a key scene here. Sylvanas is really going to do the chemical warfare thing, which the undead just always love to do. And Saurfang has a big issue with it, but he goes through with it because he wants to be loyal to the Horde. And I think this is some really, really good drama here. And once again, it brings up that point that I made about how the undead will do whatever she says. And you don't necessarily see that with the orcs among the orcs. There's some dissension, particularly if you go back to Garage. You don't see it with the Night Elves. There's some dissension with Tyrande and... what's the other guy's name? I know he was Major... I can't think of his name. Stranghelm, I think his name was, where he's like, oh, Tyrande has no idea how to lead our people. He just keeps saying that in Denarsis, which essentially is ashes right now. Hope I didn't give anything away there, but I did say spoilers a while ago. So as you can see, they got this green blight everywhere, this green poisonous gas everywhere. And it just looks really cool. This really looks like a war zone. This really looks like a battle. And one thing that I am starting to think and starting to believe, that there's a spirit of war going on. There's a spirit of battle. There's a spirit of PvP going on. And I think you can't escape it. And because you can't escape it, it's going to keep needling at you like a velvet hammer and just constantly be in your face, constantly intruding on you in a very soft, consistent way, like a velvet hammer. And eventually you're going to try some PvP. Whether it's islands in a PvP mode, or it's war mode, or it's a battleground, a skirmish, I think the overall spirit is at least going to make people try it out. Make people who haven't tried it before or tried it and said, this sucks, and then decide, hey, let me give it another shot. That's just a thought. What are your thoughts? I will say this. I do believe that that whole spirit and theme of war and conflict is stitched into this like I've never seen before. You haven't seen this kind of consistency with a theme or a conflict since Wrath of the Lich King. Now, I'm not saying this is as good as Wrath of the Lich King. Matter of fact, I'll go on a record and say, no, it's not going to be. But in that respect, there is a very consistent theme, and it is stitched throughout the story, through everything you do. It's almost like you're in picture yourself in a football stadium, whether American football or European football, and people are starting to do the wave. And first couple of times, like, nah, I don't want to get up. I had a hard day at work or school or whatever. And then after a while in the wave, then you kind of get into the mood some way or another. Maybe your team starts to win. Maybe somebody convinces you to do it. Maybe your friends do it. And I think that that has a potential to stir up some interest in PvP. Now, whether the product of PvP is something that people are going to find different and find engaging remains to be seen. But I think at least people will start queuing and start giving things a shot. At least those are my hopes. And I'm not necessarily an optimistic person, to be honest. I'm more of a cynic, to be very honest. But in this case, I do see a positive here. I try to also be fair, and I do see that there's some potential that we're going to start to see some very interesting things as far as people maybe trying PvP. Okay, I promised that I might piss off the lore geeks, and this is where I do it. So if you're really into the lore, and it can do no wrong for you, this is where you should probably stop watching the video, because I'm going to give you something called a little bit of logic. We all know who Valen is, and he's part of the Alliance, and he is actually probably closest to Anduin than any other person in the Alliance, which means that he's going to have a certain level of respect and understanding about things Anduin is passionate about or things that Anduin pursues. They have a connection. This is in the lore, this is noted, this is a fact. And here's what I don't understand. Velen, who is part of the Alliance, and certainly a father figure to some extent, or a grandfather figure for Anduin, so you'd think that these two would still have an alliance, still be on the same side. Velen has something called a spaceship, the Exodar, which is a pretty fucking powerful thing, especially since the Horde don't have an equivalent. So here's what I don't understand. If you want to take over Lordaeron, why not just soften the defenses with your spaceship? This is what I don't understand. You could even feign or fake a ground assault and then just have the defenses weakened by the spaceship. You could just bring the Horde to their knees with that spaceship. The question is, why are they doing that? This is a major plot hole. Now, there is a possibility that something's going to happen to the Exodar. Maybe the transmission goes, and they don't have enough gold to fix it. Maybe it's leased, and the lease is up, and he has to return it. Or maybe Velen has some sort of conflict with the Alliance, and he doesn't want to contribute to this, which I find hard to believe, but that's the magic of story. You could always make something believable, and that's the point. This is just completely unbelievable. The Alliance have a fucking spaceship. Why aren't they using it against the Horde? They're letting so many honorable, good soldiers die in this ground assault when they could just nuke Lordaeron into oblivion. And you might say, well, they don't want to kill all the Horde. Give me a break. Or you might say, well, they want to keep Lordaeron intact, which is reasonable. But how intact is Lordaeron when the undead unleash the blight, the poison? How livable is Gilneas when the undead did that? So you see my point here? Regardless, this place is no longer very livable with all the blight and everything. So I don't understand it. Normally in warfare, and this is documented throughout history, this is documented even in other games, you soften the defenses through aerial assaults. I mean, the fact that the Alliance possess a spaceship is very much reminiscent of the Romans possessing an F-14 to attack barbarians. Why aren't they using it? Sylvanas is using whatever she can at her disposal. She has no problem using the poison, no problem using blight. I don't get it. And maybe there's a reasonable explanation that's going to come, but this is a huge plot hole. Monstrous plot hole. And I mean, if Game of Thrones fans, spoiler warning for Season 7 here. You've been warned. Daenerys Targaryen has 3 dragons. She uses one dragon to absolutely nuke the Lannister troops. I mean, just not even a shot. That's how strong an aerial assault is, especially when your enemy doesn't possess one. Alliance has a spaceship, the Horde don't. I want an explanation for this. I'm sorry. I do. I'm sure maybe there's something, I don't know, aside of that major loophole or plot hole. This is still a very, very good scenario. I've only experienced the entry into Catechism so I saw the entry of Catechism, which really was more of a pre-patch thing than a introduced to the Catechism zones thing. Mott, which was not much of a pre-patch, but you did have that introduction to the zones both on the Horde and the Alliance side, which I thought was kind of underwhelming and really created a bottleneck for people to get into those zones at the time, and a big launch issue as a result of that. And then also in Warlords of Draenor, all the fun, you had what was a pretty good introduction into it, and then you went either to an Alliance zone or a Horde zone, which I thought was a very, very good introduction. And now in Legion, which I think was probably one of the better introductions, just because I really love that cinematic and the overall theme of things in the beginning. And that was something that I think was my overall favorite. And I would probably put this one at my second favorite. So it's not as good of an introduction into the zones, into the story, as Legion was. But I think that this one is still very, very good. And as you just recently saw in this particular video, Ilaria steps up and she kind of does her thing at the last minute, showing up, which is very true to her character, something that's stitched into her character. And I thought it was interesting they brought that aspect up again. Very, very good. And there's Mekator, or whatever that dumb gnome's name is. I mean, come on, gnomes and war. You know, this is just, it's like, okay, let's go to war. Who's on your side? Well, we have some Smurfs, and you guys have gnomes. It's like Munchkins, Oompa Loompas. I mean, come on, in war? I mean, well, then again, look at the Ewoks. The Ewoks are pretty mean in Return of the Jedi. Anyway, so we're on to pursuit of the Sylvanas, and now Saurfang is going to have his big moment. And this is actually a really cool scene. Saurfang is ready to defend. He's basically there to hold the fort, to basically give himself up for Sylvanas, which he doesn't really do. He ends up getting captured, which really sets up a very interesting storyline and scenario on the Horde side. So he's just doing this, you know, he's got to have the heroic scene here, and you got to give it to him. You got to give it to him. It's like people were talking in Game of Thrones about major characters dying in Season 8, etc., but they're going to do it off screen. No, you're not going to kill a major character off screen. You're going to get the full dramatic effect of it. You're going to have him go out in a bang of glory. Now, like I said, Saurfang gets captured here, and it just shows that overall Horde and Alliance similarity, in the sense that they both kind of have people within their faction that have respect for the same hierarchy of honor. And I think this is a common link between the Horde and Alliance, and maybe even a greater good between the Horde and the Alliance. And you look at it and you think, well, this is the common thread throughout the game that teamed us up to fight the Lich King, teamed us up to fight Deathwing, Garrosh, etc., etc., etc. And now all of a sudden, because of some big misunderstanding, everybody's pissed off again, and it's back to the original Warcraft Horde versus the Alliance in this conflict. This is a really, really good dramatic scene overall between Saurfang and young Anduin, who a lot of people still don't like, and I do understand why, but I really want to see some growth in Anduin. I really want to see this arc into maturity, this arc into, okay, he's no longer a teenager, a whiny teenager, he's now a man. You know, I really want to see that. And it's really hard to do, just simply because Anduin is a priest, Anduin is someone who respects life, and he's not going to grab a sword and just kill somebody and rile the troops in that regard. And that's kind of what you need to see from him to grow up. And unless he theorizes something, some commonality between the Horde and the Alliance, more so than honor, that can bring them together and unite, that is also a sign of strength as well, but not quite as compelling as just kicking butt, if you know what I mean. So this is going to close out the overall scene. You pursue Sylvanas. There's a cutscene, and we don't have it yet. And then you come back to good old Stormwind. And then you have to venture into Borealis, which I will have a video on eventually, and go over it. But overall, I do like this, even though I was making fun of the fact that the Alliance have a spaceship that could pretty much end the war, but they don't use it for some reason, and we don't know why. Maybe they'll tell us, maybe they won't. This is Luxeley saying, whatever it is by you, whether it is morning, afternoon, or night, make it epic.